Tonight on Reporting Scotland, we're live in Balmedie in Aberdeenshire, where President Trump is due to arrive for the second part of his 5-day trip. The Prime Minister and the First Minister are expected to join him for dinner tonight at his golf course in the Menny estate. The President has been meeting Sir Keir Starmer throughout the day. Among the talking points, tariffs on whisky.
I didn't know whisky was a problem. I'm not a big whisky drinker.
Also on the programme tonight, the huge security operation around the President's visit, which is on a scale never before seen here in Scotland. And in the day's other news, the First Minister sets out a new threshold for a second independence referendum, namely an SNP majority at Holyrood. A woman who filmed a child under 10 driving a car down an Aberdeenshire street gets a community payback order.
And coming up in tonight's sport, after a fourth-place finish at the Tour de France, Oscar Onley's tipped for a podium place in the next few years.
Hello, I'm Laura Goodwin in the Reporting Scotland studio. And I'm Laura Miller, live from Aberdeenshire for this extended edition of Reporting Scotland. Hello and welcome to Balmedie in Aberdeenshire, where the President of the United States, Donald Trump, is expected imminently. He will be touching down in the presidential helicopter Marine One at his golf course here for the second leg of his visit to Scotland. With him, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, who accompanied him from Turnberry in Ayrshire. Also here tonight, the First Minister John Swinney, joining them for an official dinner later. This is, of course, billed as a private visit. The official state visit is later this year. But during Donald Trump's time here so far, he's already talked at length to reporters and, among other things, promised to take a fresh look at tariffs imposed on whisky imports to the US. First tonight, though, our political editor Glenn Campbell has the story of the day.
Arriving at Turnberry to the strain of the bagpipes, the Prime Minister with his wife Victoria are welcomed to Trump's Ayrshire golf resort by the President. Tricky discussions on Gaza, Ukraine and possible refinements to the UK's trade deal with the US lie ahead, with one journalist asking if the taxes applied to Scotch whisky sold into America might be reduced.
Whiskey? Well, we'll talk about that. I didn't know whiskey was a problem. I'm not a big whiskey drinker, but maybe I should be.
So the 10% tariff is that a floor? Is the 10% tariff a floor?
Well, we're going to take a look at it.
Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you later.
That apparent willingness to take a further look at whisky tariffs delighted the industry, even if it comes without any guarantees. At Glengarry Distillery in Aberdeenshire, Scotch whisky representatives teamed up with their American counterparts to champion free trade.
The US is our biggest export market, and that's particularly important for our smaller members. And actually here in the UK, we're the third biggest export destination for the US spirits industry. So there's interest on both sides of the Atlantic in doing this deal.
We're going to advocate that we get back to zero for zero tariffs, because economic vitality right here in Scotland and in the United States and the greater hospitality industry is critical. And we have thrived as a result of zero for zero tariffs.
After wider discussions between the Prime Minister and the President, Donald Trump said he would be pushing Russia harder and faster for a deal on Ukraine. With aid drops into Gaza to ease the humanitarian crisis, both leaders spoke of the need to do more to help those in desperate need and to end the conflict.
We've had the opportunity to talk about the situation in Gaza and the intolerable situation, including images of starvation.
We want to get the children fed. We made a contribution a week ago of $60 million, all going into food. We only hope the food goes to the people that need it.
Donald Trump was keen to avoid being drawn into any debate over Scottish independence. And Keir Starmer made clear it was not for him to decide if Trump Turnberry should be allowed to host the Open Golf Championship, although he did describe the venue as magnificent. And with that, departure from Ayrshire to relocate to Trump Aberdeenshire, the family's second golf resort in Scotland, with both receiving significant global publicity during the President's visit.
Well, within the last few moments, we have seen Marine One fly down over the brow of that hill, and it is now landing at the golf course. Our reporter Rebecca Curran is at the 18th hole for us with a perfect view. Rebecca, he's here then.
Yes, I think you can probably still hear the loud thrum of those telltale rotor blades. We just saw Marine One coming down in the distance just behind the trees, flanked by some other aircraft too. You join us here just beside the new 18th green of the new course, which Donald Trump is expected to open here at the Many Estate tomorrow. So President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Keir Starmer should just be touching down behind us just now. They are expected to attend a banquet dinner this evening just up the estate in the 10-bedroomed McLeod house. We're expecting that they're going to be joined by First Minister John Swinney, as well as the US Ambassador, the golfer Colin Montgomery, and some business leaders too. I'm told on the menu is locally sourced food. There's also a whiskey bar in the house, so you can bet that'll be on the agenda, although they may be talking tariffs rather than sipping drams, I think. But it does feel like this stage of the visit is going to be maybe a little bit more informal. It has always been described as a private visit, but of course there is politics at play, and Donald Trump will know that the eyes of the world, I think we're actually just seeing the pictures of Marine One at the moment, are we? So you can see that helicopter coming into land over the Many Estate, as I say, with President Trump and Prime Minister Keir Starmer on board. But President Trump is expected to open the new course here at the Many Estate tomorrow. He will know that the eyes of the world will be on that, and he will be hoping that will bring some extra business here. Although it has raised some eyebrows, not least with members of the public, that this apparently private visit, who is going to be paying for all the extra policing and security costs that come with a travelling president. And let's remember as well that this course itself has been controversial, but all eyes will be here as they have a more informal meeting tonight, dinner at a banquet at McLeod House.
Yeah, much more on all of that to come, Rebecca, and we were sort of momentarily drowned out by Marine One and also by some of the cows behind me who seem a little bit confused about it all, but thank you for the moment, Rebecca. Now, he is an unconventional president, one who divides opinion across the globe, and he's no stranger to Scotland, of course. He is half Scottish, his mother hailing from the island of Lewis. Our reporter Gillian Sharp has more now on what people think about Donald Trump's visit.
Far away from the entourage and the high-level meetings, people here in Partick in Glasgow are busy with a regular Monday. On the President's visit, they have mixed views.
I don't like President Trump, so I'm not particularly keen that he's visiting us. I guess he has to be allowed to be here, but yeah, I'm not particularly keen.
Financially, we have to negotiate with him a lower tariff, so therefore I think it's quite a good thing that he's here. The fact that he's visiting his golf courses makes him happy, so therefore he's probably in a better mood to actually negotiate.
But it's different when your mother was born here, Stornoway. Right in Stornoway.
The President's Scottish ties featured at a press conference earlier. So would people in Stornoway, name-checked by Mr Trump, have liked to have seen him visit the island?
I'm not particularly disappointed. Of course, I think he's very toxic, and I don't think we'll suffer because of that.
It'd be great for him to come, whether we'd have a row of people with a flag and hi Donald.
It'd be nice if he would come back and see where his mother would have lived and where she grew up and where he comes from.
Teeing off at Brunsfield Links in Edinburgh, golf has been the name of the game this visit for the President, and a range of views here in Edinburgh.
I don't think anyone wants him anywhere right now, especially. Obviously, you're seeing little pictures, he's playing a lot of golf in Scotland, so we thought we'd, try and enjoy it, change the narrative.
He's the elected president You know, it was a democratic election. You've got to respect the views of the American people. It's one of our biggest trade partners. It's one of our biggest allies. You know, I think you've got to grow up and welcome him.
And golf still high on the agenda as the visit continues. Gillian Sharp, reporting Scotland.
Well, our political editor Glenn Campbell joins me now. Been quite busy around these parts within the last few minutes, hasn't it? But Donald Trump has been speaking to reporters at length today, and as we've come to expect from the President, there's been no shortage of news lines. You've been busy.
Well, the exchanges with reporters have been expansive, both before and after his formal meeting with the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, wide-ranging as well. It seems that one of the main outcomes from the talks today has been the President's suggestion that he will put more pressure on President Putin of Russia to come to a deal on Ukraine. He's talked about making a formal announcement in the next day or two, which may result in a much earlier deadline for President Putin to come to the table and come to some sort of agreement, perhaps in 11 or 12 days' time. And if not, the suggestion that there will be more economic pressure on Russia to move on this issue. Of course, there have been discussions about Gaza and the plight of the people there who we've seen in television images are clearly starving. And there have been discussions on trade. Remember that Donald Trump has struck a trade deal with the EU over the weekend. There already is a trade deal with the UK, but there are a number of issues that are still under discussion. And before the two leaders went into the Turnberry Hotel, some of their comments were being drowned out by a piper who I noticed at one point was playing Campbellton Loch, I Wish You Were Whiskey, and perhaps that was appropriate because one of the issues that the UK and Scottish governments wants to push is a potential reduction in the tariff that's applied to Scotch whisky being imported into the United States.
Yeah, it seems to be a theme of the visit, noise drowning people out here. But let's talk about John Swinney then. He is expected here tonight for that banquet Rebecca was talking about. What do you think John Swinney can hope to gain from this visit?
Well, John Swinney, I think, is due to arrive at Trump International here in Aberdeenshire any minute, and he is a guest at a dinner being hosted by Donald Trump this evening for the Prime Minister and others. I think John Swinney's more formal talks with Donald Trump will take place here tomorrow. John Swinney is a guest of the Trumps at the opening of a second golf course. What's quite interesting about those talks is it's not entirely clear whether they have been arranged by the White House or by the Trump organisation which owns these golf resorts. Now, either way, John Swinney is determined to raise a range of political issues, both domestic and international. But I think that confusion, if you like, underlines the blurred nature of the way Donald Trump conducts himself, mixing his presidential business with his private business interests, including these two golf resorts in Scotland, and you never quite know on what basis he's operating. I think it's fair to say that his visit is drawing enormous amounts of global attention to these golf resorts, and there are those, including some of his political opponents, who are very concerned about that. They feel that he is misusing his office to benefit his business interests because, some people might think that supporting those businesses is a way to get the president's ear or to get access to aspects of the US government.
Yeah, indeed, and viewers may have been able to hear and see that Marine 1 was sort of circling for a moment there. I wonder if there was perhaps a detour taken over for an aerial view of his course. We shall find that out later, but for the moment, thank you very much, Glenn. Well, the journey from Turnberry to Menny here is roughly a 4-hour drive, but for reasons of speed and safety, the President travelled on Air Force 1 from Prestwick to RAF Lossiemouth, then by helicopter, as you heard here, on Marine 1 to Aberdeenshire. The focus of the massive security operation which protected the President has now shifted north as well. Our Home Affairs correspondent David Cowan reports.
Donald Trump built his resort at Menny because of its spectacular location, but the dunes and beach present a challenge for security. Snipers manned a vantage point overlooking the new course A thin yellow line down to the sea marks where the beach is out of bounds. In the distance, the offshore wind farms the president detests. They had little to do until late morning when a lone protester arrived from Fraserburgh.
Come here to protest against Donald Trump for what is being allowed to happen in Gaza, the bombs he's been dropping. It's really a disgrace.
The security operation is costing millions, with 6,000 officers on duty over the course of 4 days. There is a slightly surreal feeling here today. On one side of this big, beautiful beach, you have people playing in the sand and walking their dogs. On the other side, beyond that line of police officers, that entire area is sealed off under anti-terror legislation. Protesters sought different ways to make their point. The couple who own this vintage bus normally use it for day trips and holidays. They brought it to Balmedie with a message for the president on Gaza.
I don't have an opinion on Trump. What I would say is he can stop it tomorrow or today. He's capable of stopping it. Our sign reaches out to him.
We just need to stop the starvation. We need it all to stop. That's what I want him to do.
Others will support his position on the Middle East and on the oil industry. In Aberdeenshire, just as it is in Turnberry, the president's business is important for the local economy.
So it is helping us. It is helping big time to get the bookings, and then people coming in to see him, people coming to work for him.
As the president left Turnberry for Aberdeenshire, dozens of people were marching towards his golf resort at Menny. Protesters are trying to get as close as they can to Donald Trump's golf course, but there's only so far they can go for two reasons. Police have blocked access to the beach and it's high tide.
I think it's an outrage. I think everything he's doing is absolutely outrageous, and I think he's not welcome here in Scotland, and that's what the protest here and at the weekend has been showing very clearly.
We're just left with a golf course that none of the locals can play at because it's far too expensive. And yes, but just the fact that we bow down to this body is not okay.
The police are tasked with making sure the President and Prime Minister can discuss a turbulent world safely and without interruption. In 24 hours' time, here at least, peace and quiet will return.
Well, Dave is at the security checkpoint to the golf course. Dave, we know the police were preparing for protests, but what do you make of the ones we've seen so far?
Well, I think the protesters have been making their point. When the President of the United States is in town, you don't need to march in your thousands to get publicity. Any voices that are raised in opposition are going to get coverage, and if that procession that was in the report there down to beside the golf course at Menny today was maybe about 150 people involved, but there were lots of photographers, lots of camera crews taking pictures, taking video, which will be seen by the media around the world. Protesters these days are also very good at finding new, innovative ways of grabbing the media's attention, and a short time ago a boat flying a Palestinian flag could be seen in the sea off Menny here, pursued by a police patrol boat. A short time ago we saw it again. It looked like the boat with the flag was being escorted by the police, and then, as you said, one of the helicopters has made a long, slow circuit around the golf course here at Menny. We don't know, of course, whether they could see the boat, whether it was still in vision. I think the scale and nature of the huge security operation that we saw down at Turnberry and that's now up in place up here in Menny will have been a factor as well in keeping protests low key. One thing I should tell you is that down the road here there are about half a dozen people wearing Make America Great Again hats in support of Donald Trump.
OK, Dave, thank you. And I will be back with more from Balmedie later in the programme. But for now, let's get the day's other news with Laura Goodwin in the Reporting Scotland studio. Laura.
Laura, thank you. First Minister John Swinney says an SNP majority at Holyrood will be the only way to secure a second independence referendum. That's a tall feat. It's only been achieved once in the history of devolution. The Prime Minister has labelled it the politics of yesteryear, and some within Mr Swinney's own party have cast doubt on his approach. Our political correspondent David Wallace-Lockhart reports.
That is my absolute all-time favourite.
It's not every day the First Minister joins your picnic. The topic of conversation, a new independence strategy, straight from the horse's mouth. Visiting the Kelpies near Falkirk, John Swinney said a referendum can only happen if the SNP win a Holyrood majority next year. Why set himself such a high bar?
Let's look at the history of all of this. The only moment in which Scotland had a referendum on independence was when a majority of SNP MSPs were elected to the Scottish Parliament. So that's crystal clear, that's the way it happens. And there's no UK Prime Minister that can sit around and essentially deny the democratic wishes of the people of Scotland.
Support for independence is higher than support for the SNP. So with this election coming next year, it does make sense for John Swinney to tie the SNP's fortunes as closely to the cause of independence as he can. But even if a majority is achieved, it's the Prime Minister who has the power to green-light any referendum. And during his press conference with the US President, it didn't sound like he's on board.
The strength of the United Kingdom together is very important for all four nations, very important for Scotland, and that should be our priority, that should be our focus, not on the politics, which feels like the politics of yesteryear now.
The US President suggested not enough time had passed since the last one.
Well, I don't want to get involved in your politics. We got enough politics of our own. There was a little bit of a restriction, like 50 or 75 years before you could take another vote. Because, you know, a country can't go through that too much.
Even some within the SNP aren't sold. Alex Neil used to sit in the Scottish Government Cabinet with John Swinney.
You're not going to get a referendum. But if you get the level of support, particularly with the SNP and other pro-independence parties, if you can get over 50% of the vote, then quite frankly, the game's a bogey then. The union is over. And that's what John should be fighting for. And I think the suspicion is this is more about trying to save the SNP's bacon rather than an honest attempt to win independence.
The Scottish Conservatives say move on.
We had that referendum, the country said no, and it's time that we moved forward as a nation. And I think more importantly, the SNP are the ones who seem to have this problem. They need to keep that voter base together, and this is the desperate messaging we see almost on a monthly basis coming from the SNP.
John Swinney will now take his proposal to the SNP's conference, where party members will have their say.
And David joins us in the studio now. David, what's behind this from John Swinney?
So it may sound obvious, but with an election looming, it makes sense for John Swinney to link the SNP as closely to the cause of independence as he can, because largely speaking, that's the pool of voters that he's fishing in. He doesn't only face election threats from constitutional opponents like Labour and the Conservatives. He faces the threat of bleeding votes to other pro-independence parties like the Greens, like the Alba Party, parties who say that he does not have a monopoly on independence voters. Now, independence has felt a bit more low-key recently. We heard Keir Starmer there call it the politics of yesteryear. I don't think that's fair, though, because this is still a massive political issue for many voters in Scotland, the key issue for many voters in Scotland, a large number of whom may have loaned a vote to Labour at the last general election in order to get the Conservatives out of the UK government, who may not like hearing Keir Starmer talk about independence in those terms.
And as you mentioned, there is a looming Holyrood election. How achievable is an SNP majority at that next election?
So it's important to remember there's a different voting system for Holyrood compared to Westminster. It's more proportional, and therefore it's much harder for a party to get an outright majority. It's only been done once back in 2011, and lots of people said that was the SNP breaking the system when they did that. Something would need to change quite dramatically in the current SNP fortunes for them to even just get a one-seat majority, though there is still quite some time until that election. Even if a majority was to happen, it doesn't sound like Keir Starmer wants to grant a referendum, and it is ultimately within his gift. But also, let's think about if it doesn't happen, if that majority doesn't come to fruition, is that essentially John Swinney saying that therefore in that scenario, independence is off the agenda until the 2030s. He's going to take this idea to SNP conference, where I think it will be very keenly debated by party members.
OK, David, many thanks indeed. A woman who allowed a girl aged under 10 to drive a car through an Aberdeenshire village has been given a community payback order. Sophie Lee Gemmell previously admitted culpable and reckless conduct after footage emerged of the incident, which took place in July last year. At Peterhead Sheriff Court, Gemmell was ordered to carry out 134 hours of unpaid work. Rachel Bell reports.
Sophie Lee Gemmell, who is 32, previously admitted culpable and reckless conduct with utter disregard for the consequences. by allowing a child to drive on a public road in poor conditions barefoot, to the danger of others, but in particular to the child. The incident happened on the 10th of July last year in the Aberdeenshire village of Crimond. A video of the incident, which lasted about a minute, was seen on social media. It showed the child driving in the dark, using the wipers and indicators and peering over the steering wheel. The child was barefoot and you can hear music playing. Gemmell, who is from Crimond, can be heard cheering. Peterhead Sheriff Court today heard that the child was clearly struggling to see over the steering wheel, that the wipers were going and there were large areas of standing water on the road. The court also heard that when police later attended Gemmell's address, she said, "Is this about the driving thing? I shouldn't have done it." Sentencing Gemmell today, Sheriff Alan Sinclair described her actions as reckless in the extreme. He added Gemmell was very fortunate not to have suffered more serious consequences. Gemmell was ordered to carry out 134 hours of unpaid work, reduced from 200 because of her plea to be completed within 12 months. The court was told Gemmell wished to apologise and showed genuine remorse for her actions. Rachel Bell, reporting Scotland, Peterhead.
A nurse has told an employment tribunal that nurse Sandy Peggy referred to a transgender doctor as a weirdo and made racist jokes about the victims of a flood in Pakistan on a holiday group chat. Ms Peggy claims NHS Fife acted unlawfully by allowing transgender doctor Beth Upton to use the female changing room in Kirkcaldy's Victoria Hospital, a claim disputed by the Health Board. Graham Ogston reports.
Sandy Peggy greeting supporters as she arrives for the 9th day of this reconvened employment tribunal in Dundee. Ms Peggy has lodged a claim against the Health Board and Dr Upton, seen here at the tribunal in February, citing the 2010 Equality Act, including sexual harassment, harassment related to a protected belief, indirect discrimination and victimisation. The tribunal heard evidence today from 2 emergency nurse practitioners at the hospital, Sharon Wishart, seen here with her face covered, and Lindsay Nicholl. Sharon Wishart said that Ms Peggy made derogatory remarks about Dr Upton during a lunch in September 2023, 3 months before a confrontation between the pair in the female changing room. Ms Wishart said she couldn't remember who told her about the remarks being made, but she was subsequently told Nurse Peggy had referred to Dr Upton as a weirdo, freak and it. Ms Wishart said, "I can only say I personally think she would have held these views, as I've heard her make derogatory remarks about people of other ethnic origins and other sexual orientations." Asked by Dr Upton's lawyer Jane Russell Casey what these remarks were, Ms Wishart replied, "Immigrants need to go back to their own country. They steal our jobs. These are opinions that don't align with me." The nurse also said that at the same event she heard Sandy Peggy refer to a mosque being built in Kirkcaldy and that she had a good mind to post bacon through their letterbox, and that Miss Wishart remembered the remark as she found it so offensive. Another nurse, Lindsay Nicholl, said she regularly went on holiday with Sandy Peggy and 5 other colleagues, and that the holiday group chat had been running since 2017. Ms Russell highlighted 10 messages within a chat from Sandy Peggy, making offensive jokes about the 2022 flood in Pakistan, which Ms Nicholl said were racist. Ms Nicholl said she was quite derogatory. She'd follow it up with, "Sorry if that makes me a racist," and we would laugh at her because she clearly was. Ms Nicholl said that she had also been at the lunch attended by Shirley Wishart and said she distinctly remembered hearing Sandy Peggy refer to Dr Upton as a weirdo. Sandy Peggy's lawyer, Naomi Cunningham, asked Ms Nicholl, "You thoroughly dislike Sandy Peggy, don't you?" Ms Nicholl replied, "I'm actually really sad about the whole situation. We're clearly different people." Ms Cunningham said, "You've got it in for her, don't you? That's why you're here." She replied, "I'm here because it's important to see what kind of character Sandy is." The tribunal continues tomorrow. Graham Ogston, reporting Scotland, Dundee.
There's hope tonight that hundreds of jobs could be saved at the bus builder Alexander Dennis. 400 posts are under threat at the company's factories in Falkirk and Larbert, but the Scottish Government says it's hopeful it may have found a way to keep them open. Well, let's speak to our news correspondent, Jamie McIver, who's there for us tonight. Jamie, positive signs, but there's still a lot to do.
A lot to do, but the language, the tone today from the Deputy First Minister, Kate Forbes, was certainly sounding optimistic. She was updating the unions on the work being done to try to find a way of saving the plants. Now, to remind you, Alexander Dennis announced back in June that it was proposing to stop manufacturing here in Falkirk and nearby in Larbert and centralise the work at Scarborough in Yorkshire. That would put 400 jobs under threat. Now, Kate Forbes says she's limited in what she's able to say publicly just now because of commercial confidentiality, but she's very hopeful a way might have been found which might allow the company to keep the Scottish operations open.
But what we're hopeful about now is that, subject to some further due diligence work, that there is a package there which Alexander Dennis have indicated would satisfy their requirements for additional work to retain the jobs and to retain the sites. There is still work to be done, but I've spent this morning updating the unions, consulting with the unions, speaking to them, and I've also met with the company today about moving this on.
But Jamie, time is running out.
Well, indeed it is. The consultation on the redundancies runs until August the 15th. That's just 2.5 weeks away. And the company has made it clear it doesn't simply need new orders. What it would be looking for would be some kind of sustainable flow of work, which would be big enough to justify having the bus building operations here in Scotland and other bus building operations in Scarborough. There has been no comment in public, at least from the company today, but the trade unions are certainly sounding more hopeful too. In the meantime, the Scottish Government is calling for the consultation period on the redundancies to be extended past August the 15th, and it's already discussed the possibility of some kind of limited furlough scheme. I think this week is certainly going to prove very crucial if there's to be any hope of saving the Scottish jobs.
OK, Jamie, many thanks indeed. A man has appeared at Paisley Sheriff Court following a disturbance on an EasyJet flight from Luton to Glasgow. 41-year-old Abhay Nayak from Luton was arrested on arrival at Glasgow Airport on Sunday morning. He entered no plea and will appear in court again in 8 days. Nayak is not facing terrorism charges. Right, time now for tonight's sport with Sheila.
Thank you, Laura. Hello there. Oscar Onley says his fourth-placed finish at the Tour de France will take some time to sink in. The 22-year-old from Kelso equalled the best result by a Scot in the world's biggest bike race. His former coach has told BBC Scotland that he believes he's good enough to make the podium in the next few years. Our sports news correspondent Chris McLaughlin reports.
The biggest, most picturesque, the most famous bike race in the world, and at times the most gruelling. For the past 3 weeks, Oscar Onley has been mixing it with the best.
The face of a hungry man, Robert Miller.
It's been a full 40 years since a Scot reached the heady heights of fourth, the King of the Mountains, Robert Miller, back in 1984. Now, am I calling you Philippa or Pippa? Robert Miller is now Philippa York.
It's a pity it's taken so long, and hopefully it won't take another 40 years to see somebody come along that is as good as Oscar. I'm not surprised because we're in Scotland. There's such a small pool of cycling that you can't have somebody exceptional all the time unless you've got a really big base to it. But it is really nice to see, and I think we should kind of celebrate that.
Changed rapidly, and here's Oscar Onley.
This was Onley's first attempt at a general classification in the Tour. He impressed many, but didn't surprise everyone.
No, I always knew that he was going to be good at the climbs. Even last year, when he was up there in a couple of stages, I knew he had a good chance. I think people were talking about going for a stage this year, but I knew that he wouldn't give up the GC to begin with. And yeah, no, it was great that he managed the 3 weeks and stay up there. I think he's still got a few more years of development, and after this one, I think he'll believe in himself even more. So yeah, I think we'll see him getting better and better over the next few years. So yeah, I would definitely wouldn't be surprised to see him on the podium in the next couple of years.
With the Tour coming to Scotland in 2027, that would be something to celebrate. That's then, for now, in the country where biking is art, he'll take fourth and do some celebrating of his own. Chris McLaughlin, reporting Scotland.
Now to football, and the Scottish FA has brought in aviation experts to train its referees to communicate like pilots in a cockpit and help them make rational decisions under pressure. Ahead of his second season in the post, head of refereeing Willie Collum says they held a session with top officials and delivered training which included decision-making and how to remain calm in tricky situations, all of which the former Category 1 referee says is crucial for their roles.
So yesterday we were the top referees at a meeting with 2 aviation experts, 2 top people in the UK who help train pilots, and they were talking to us about communication in the cockpit in very, very difficult situations, very much under pressure, and we learned a lot about the calmness, about really taking in the environment, thinking about what was happening. That was very beneficial to the referees. Pilots, it's life or death. You know, people would say it's life or death in football as well, but we need to work really hard with our teams in the VAR centre about how they're communicating, about keeping calm, about thinking about the facts, really being really rational in their approach there.
Glasgow City assistant manager Leanne Crichton is the front-runner to become the new Rangers women's head coach. The Ibrox club have held positive talks with the former Scotland player, and she is expected to replace Joe Potter, who left to manage Crystal Palace last month. And that's all your sport on a busy night.
It sure is, Sheila. Thank you very much indeed. We will be crossing back to the team at Balmedy shortly, but first the weather with Joy.
Hello, good evening. Well, as you can see, it's been very cloudy, overcast today. That's thanks to high pressure that's been lingering. And as we move through the next few days, high pressure is still going to be with us. But as we moved into late afternoon this evening, we did see some sunshine, particularly across more eastern spots. And this evening and overnight, it is going to stay dry for a time, under clear skies. Good few showers continuing across the northeast, but then after midnight we'll see cloud thickening from the west and this band of light patchy rain pushing into the northwest Highlands, the Western Isles, moving its way through the Inner Hebrides all the way to the southwest. Tending to be a mild night for the most part, although for parts of the northeast, temperatures falling away to 7 to 9 Celsius under the clearer skies, winds light. Tomorrow there will be some early brightness, but quite quickly, as we can see, cloud will begin to work its way eastwards, covering much of the country, thick enough to produce the odd light rain and drizzle at times. But for the Northern Isles, Shetland in particular, staying dry, plenty of sunshine to be enjoyed there with a northwesterly wind, though potentially feeling a touch cooler. Elsewhere tomorrow, dry, settled, cloudy. That cloud could be thick enough to produce some light rain and drizzle at times, although for the likes of the Central Belt and South, we will see some sunshine developing as the day progresses. Highs 19-20 Celsius and little change as we move through towards evening. Cloudy, the odd spot of light rain drizzle breaking out in the north and also working its way southwards. That is thanks to this weather front that will slowly sink its way southwards throughout Wednesday. So initially we will see some cloud and light rain drizzle, especially across the north and the northeast, working its way down to the borders. Behind that, for the Central Belt and the west, we'll see more in the way of sunshine developing, and then laterally cloud building once more into the Western Isles, down through the Hebrides into Dumfries and Galloway. More in the way of sunshine does mean for many it's going to be a warmer day, highs of 21 Celsius at best, winds still relatively light. And as we move into Thursday and Friday, turning a touch more unsettled as weather fronts push in from the west. So Thursday itself will be a day of mixed fortunes. For many it was going to stay dry, a mixture of sunshine and cloud. A good few showers continuing, especially across more northern spots. Highs at best around about 19 or 20 Celsius, feeling cooler thanks to that northwesterly airflow. That's your forecast.
Thank you, Joy. Yeah, the sun certainly does seem to be popping in and out from behind the clouds here. So welcome back to Balmedy for this specially extended edition of Reporting Scotland, where President Trump is hosting a dinner at his golf club just down the hill behind me there. Among those in attendance, the Prime Minister and the First Minister. Donald Trump first visited Scotland, though, as a child with his late mother to her home village on the Isle of Lewis. It was his Scottish ancestry which has constantly drawn him back to this country and has attracted his investments in the sport he loves. President Trump's golf course has attracted criticism, though, and so have his visits when he flies in. Andrew Kerr looks back now over our archives at the Donald's trips over the Atlantic.
Inside the White House, behind the seat of power in the Oval Office, black and white pictures of Donald Trump's beloved mother. Marianne McLeod left Tongue and Lewis for the US in 1930. The president never lost his links with the old country, and his love of golf drew him to Aberdeen in 2006 after the purchase of the Many estate.
This is where my mother was born and raised. She was raised in Stornoway, the Isle of Lewis, and she loves Scotland, and you know, my whole family loves Scotland. So it's great to come back to Scotland.
It was a hard-fought path to get the course established.
Hi folks, who are you with?
BBC.
Very good. Great group.
The Trump organisation battled against local opposition and planning objections, leading to a big inquiry.
I don't have too many critics. Most people are in favour of the job. Most people love the job. There aren't very many critics.
But he was successful.
Well, I'm very honoured by the approval, and the people of Scotland, I think, in the years to come will be very, very happy with what's taken place.
It was welcomed by the then First Minister, but the pair famously fell out over wind turbines sited off the northeast coast.
Do I like him? Yes. I think he's misguided.
The Trump show rolled into Holyrood as the businessman protested in Parliament in 2012.
Wind turbines made in China are going to be the destruction and almost a total destruction of your tourism industry.
Away from business, it's been a family affair, remembering his mother in Lewis. And successive visits with sons Eric and Donald Jr. And at Aberdeen Airport, the now First Lady touched down.
It's beautiful, it's great to be here. It's my first time and I'm looking forward to see it more tomorrow. So I heard a lot of great stuff about Scotland.
And a little Baron was there too.
How do you feel about being in Scotland, Baron?
Sad.
He was honoured in Aberdeen, and in 2014 his Scottish interests widened too. There was less controversy with the redevelopment at Turnberry.
I think it's beautiful. I think really beautiful, and we're going to make it the finest in the world.
On a different visit, almost a touch of emotion at the skirl of the pipes. But there were still protests. A consistent theme. Many US presidents can boast Scottish ancestry. President Trump has trumpeted his. It's been quite a ride. Andrew Kerr, reporting Scotland.
Well, I'm joined now by the BBC's North America editor, Sarah Smith. First of all, welcome home, Sarah. We were just watching a montage there of sort of President Trump over the years in Scotland. What do you think he makes of how this visit is going so far this time?
Oh, I think he'll be very, very happy with this visit. On Sunday, he was able to sign off what's probably the largest trade deal that's ever been done with the European Union. That's a major win for him as he's coming up against the August 1st deadline of introducing tariffs on countries which haven't already signed a trade deal. So that's really very significant. But he's also got to do a couple of the things he loves the most in the world. That's playing several rounds of golf on his own golf courses. That's his great passion in life. And promoting his commercial properties is the other thing that he loves. Regardless of any rules that say that as president he ought not to be doing that kind of thing. And putting his Trump businesses first and foremost is another one of his great passions, and he's been able to do that with all the attention that's been gathered to both Turnberry and to the course here at Many.
Do you think he sees this as somewhat of a break? Because of course he's not without pressure being piled on him back home.
Some of those pressures have followed him here. The great weight around his neck at the moment is the Epstein saga, his previous relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, the convicted sex offender. He's been asked about that every day of this trip by some of the travelling American press. There's even a van with a digital photograph of the two of them together I've seen circling around Aberdeen and around here. So that story follows him wherever he goes. But at least he's able to change the subject whilst he's here, to say, look, I'm getting on with this trade deal, talking about serious matters like Gaza and Ukraine with Sir Keir Starmer, and I mean, it's a lot of work for something that was meant to be a private holiday, but it certainly allows him to change the script a little bit, although I imagine when he gets back to the United States, those problems will still be waiting for him.
Indeed, and we still have 24 hours or so to go here, but thank you very much for the moment, Sarah. So, Donald Trump has been doing deals all his life as a businessman, and he famously boasts about his ability to make deals as a president. Our business and economy editor Douglas Fraser is at the Tomatin Distillery near Inverness. Now, Douglas, this, as Sarah was saying, was billed as a private visit, but it's definitely been a working holiday.
Yes, this yet again blurs the line between the personal, family, business interests of the Trump, the Donald, and the power, the leverage that he carries as President of the United States. Here we have a US President hosting a British Prime Minister, Scottish First Minister on their turf, but on his terms and on his property as well. These two golf resorts are among 18 that have the Trump name attached to them. Mostly in the US, some in Asia, one in Ireland, but it's the Scottish ones that he wants to come and visit and to play golf here. Many newly built, getting its second course opened this weekend, but without the 450-room hotel and the hundreds of homes that he said he was going to build with £1 billion he said he was going to spend. Turnberry's a long-established hotel, golf resort, and with its luxury hotel as well. He spent big on that. The accounts suggest that his personal trust is owed £124 million for that, 40 million plus for the Many estate. Turnberry's had the Open Championship 4 times. He wants to bring that back while he's still president. He's been reported putting pressure on the British government to try to get that deal done. These are family assets run by his sons, but clearly he likes to visit them, he likes to be associated with them. He cannot relax on holiday though. He's got to keep working, he's got to keep meeting, he's got to keep doing deals, and he's got to keep dominating the news cycle.
Douglas, you're at a distillery, and the whisky industry will be hoping that the deal making that he does extends to them. Is that a feeling of hope, or do you think it's more of an expectation?
I think it's very much hope over expectation in the context of the deal making that goes on. The 10% tariff that applies to every bottle of whisky that arrives on the quayside in the United States also applies not just to whisky, but to salmon and cashmere and shortbread and specialist engineering that goes to the US as well. Donald Trump loves Scotland, he loves its golf, he's not a whisky drinker, and it's unclear that you can get below that 10% baseline for almost all imports into the US without there being a clear American advantage to doing that. Now, the First Minister is trying to persuade him to drop that 10% tariff, but also to go beyond that, because there's a threat on single malts, the premium whiskies exported, particularly to the United States, that if nothing is done, there's a 25% tariff, which was suspended 4 years ago, comes back a year from now. And that did, in the course of 18 months since Donald Trump introduced it, before Joe Biden suspended it, it cost the industry here about £600 million. Now, there's the message today, I think, from Scotch distillers. They're standing right alongside US distillers as well. They want to return to zero for zero tariffs in a free trade, tariff-free cross-Atlantic trade.
OK, Douglas Tomatin, thank you. Well, Donald Trump has repeatedly referred to Aberdeen as the oil capital of Europe, and he's urged politicians to, in his words, get rid of the windmills and bring back the oil. So what would that mean for the North Sea? I'm joined by our environment and energy correspondent, Kevin Keane. Kevin, is that even a possibility, getting rid of the wind turbines and bringing back the oil?
Well, in terms of the oil, frankly, no, it isn't, because the oil and gas industry in the North Sea has been in decline now for more than a quarter of a century. It was actually 1999 when we had peak oil, the most amount in a single year that was extracted, 2000 for gas. And that's because of geology rather than politics. Of course, during that time, we've seen 3 Labour Prime Ministers and 5 Conservatives. What it's ultimately down to is how much oil and gas there is out there, and all of of the big fields, the big reservoirs have been explored, and they've been, in some cases, largely or entirely extracted. Where there is a discrepancy is between what the industry would like to see and what the government is prepared to allow. The industry would like to see more exploration to replenish some of those depleted reservoirs, some of those that are already going through decommissioning. The government is having to balance that with its climate change commitments, and so they're not quite getting what they wanted. But even if they got everything, they would still just be managing the decline.
And let's talk about this, as we see on this coastline out behind us. Donald Trump is definitely not a fan of wind turbines, or windmills as he calls them. He has made that abundantly clear.
Yeah, windmill. They're not windmills because, of course, they don't mill a flour out of grain. They are very definitely wind turbines. And actually, his hatred for them can probably be charted back to these 11 turbines here, which, when he bought this land to build a golf course on, he set about a battle to try to prevent them from being built. He went to the courts. He tried to court politicians. He also went to a Scottish Holyrood inquiry to say, I am the evidence that these were a bad thing, but he failed in all of that attempt to try to stop them. And I think that smarted, and essentially, you could argue, has led to what is currently the energy policy of the world's largest economy.
Well, our political editor, Glenn Campbell, is also here with us tonight. Glenn, Donald Trump was asked about many things today: energy, Gaza, many things he's been dealing with. He was also asked about Scottish independence and his feelings about Scotland. What were your thoughts about the comments he made on that?
Well, he has a genuine affection for Scotland, given that his mother was born and brought up here. On independence, I don't think he really wanted to pick a side, although he has in the past expressed concern that if Scotland became independent, it might be excluded from hosting the Golf Open, which is something he would love to bring to one of his courses, probably to Turnberry at some point. On the independence issue more generally, some people will think that John Swinney is talking this up right now because he knows it might not get as much attention at a time when there will be so many Trump-related headlines. Others might say he's choosing this moment because he's had something of an elevated status during this Trump visit, with meetings directly with Donald Trump. He's at dinner with him this evening, and a meeting over the weekend with the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Meetings that probably make him look more statesman-like. In either regard, or whatever the truth of that is, the Prime Minister has been very clear today to make sure people know that he considers the issue closed, no matter the result of next year's Holyrood election.
And what do you make more generally of what we've seen of the visit so far, both in terms of how the optics of President Trump essentially hosting world leaders in Britain, the UK Prime Minister being hosted essentially in Scotland by the American President, but also more generally of the visit as a entity?
Well, I mean, I think it's been a fascinating few days in Scotland. We're not used to having a president here for this length of time, and as you say, for him to welcome other leaders from within Scotland and the UK, to host them rather than the other way around. I think my most memorable moment was a short time ago when we had a herd of cows charging down that field who seemed to be worried by all the helicopter activity. But in terms of the significance of this visit, I think it has allowed Keir Starmer and Donald Trump to further develop what appears to be quite a close working relationship. And I think I'll remember it as a moment where a US president promoted personal commercial interests in a way that I don't think any US president has done before now.
And as we said, we expect John Swinney to be at the banquet here tonight, and we expect him to have a more official meeting with President Trump tomorrow. What do you think success looks like for John Swinney here?
Well, it's a difficult position for John Swinney to be in because he has criticised Donald Trump in the past, not least for his proposals to turn Gaza into a sort of Riviera on the Mediterranean. John Swinney said that would amount to ethnic cleansing, and at that point he questioned whether the state visit due in September should go ahead. He says that times have changed, and he appears to have reconsidered that. I think there is a bit of a reset going on in the relationship between John Swinney and the Scottish Government and President Trump and his business interests here. I'm not sure if over time the Trump organisation might want something from the Scottish Government in exchange for the status that they have given him during this visit. Certainly the golf developments here in Aberdeenshire are not finished yet. There's much more to come if the Trump organisation is to deliver on the promises that Donald Trump originally made in terms of jobs and economic benefit to justify their decision to grant planning permission and for the site of scientific, special scientific interest that was here to be destroyed.
And just very briefly, we heard earlier from Douglas about the prospect of a tariff on, deal being made there for the Scotch whisky industry. How significant do you think that would be?
Well, there were no promises today, no guarantees. The President simply said that he was open to talk further on that. The UK government seems particularly concerned to bring down tariffs on steel and aluminium exports to the United States, but they and the Scottish Government also want that deal in whisky too.
OK, Glenn and Kevin, thank you. And that is it from us at Balmedie for the moment. We will have much more throughout the course of the evening and, of course, from tomorrow. Good night.
Tonight on Reporting Scotland, President Trump is on his way.
We're now heading to Scotland. I'm meeting with the Prime Minister of UK.
Trump is a bully, a racist and a megalomaniac.
It might be our only opportunity to get a glimpse of him in the flesh. We've all been Trump supporters since day one.
The police operation appears to have gone smoothly, apart from one slight setback.
Have you done the deal, Mr. President?
Whiskey? Well, we'll talk about that. I didn't know whiskey was a problem. I'm not a big whiskey drinker, but maybe I should be one.
I respect him much more today than I did before because I just met his wife and family. He's got a perfect wife and family. And that's never easy to achieve, right?